Hi, this is Sorrel from Sorrel's Cake and Pastry Workshops. Today we're going to learn how to bake my famous olive oil chocolate cake. Now I'm starting out with two pans here. You can use the same size pan or you can use different size pans, but make sure that whatever you do, you put baking paper. We're going to line the bottom of the pan with baking paper. Baking paper is not the same as wax paper. It's going to make sure that your cake does not come out in a big chunk on the bottom when you take it out of the pan after it's baked. What I'm doing now is I am measuring the bottom of the pan exactly with a pencil. Very simple. I'm marking the line around the pan so that it'll fit right in. You'll see how that happens. And now the easiest way to do it and to get a nice even cut is to draw the circle, then turn it over exactly in half, line up the pencil marks from the other side of the baking paper. It's nice and clear. And then you fold it over the same thing one more time also to make the end to end so that the pencil marks match up. And you could fold it over one more time, but I think we've decided that this time we're just going to cut it off right now. And I'm going to cut inside the pencil mark so that the pencil mark is left on the paper that you're not putting inside the pan of cake. And there you have a perfect circle. And we're going to do the same thing with the smaller pan. I'm going to fold it over exactly, match up the pencil marks so it's exact. And then when you cut, again, you're going to cut on the inside of the pencil mark so you could leave the pencil mark on whatever paper you're not putting in your pan. Okay, and you're going to see, I'm going to show you that it is really going to fit into the pan perfectly. You're not going to have any dimples or little ridges where cake can get underneath. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to spray the pan with cooking spray. If you want to just use oil on a napkin, you can, but I use the cooking spray. And I'm just right now spraying the bottom a little bit so that that piece of parchment paper, baking paper, that it fits in without slipping around. So now it's not going to move. And now I'm going to spray the sides of the pan and the bottom of the pan for both of them. Okay, and now we're ready to start working on the cake batter. Okay, now this is the flour. Now make sure that you measure the flour. I prefer to measure it with a scale. But I'm putting all my dry ingredients together. So we're talking about the flour, and now we're putting the cocoa in. Now the cocoa, we want to make sure that you don't have any chunks. Sometimes it cakes up a little bit. So we want to make sure that we get all those chunks unchunked. So whatever doesn't fit through the sifter, I'm going to actually push it through by hand. There we go. You can see how nice and dirty my fingers are. And now when we're sure that there's not going to be any chunks that don't get mixed in properly. And now here is the rest of the dry ingredients: baking powder, baking soda, salt. And I'm putting that also in the sifter because it kind of helps everything get aerated properly and mixed in properly. Okay, now I'm going to add in the sugar. That's the last of my dry ingredients. And then I'm going to take a wire whisk. It does a better job of really mixing all of the ingredients together well. And I want to mix the dry ingredients together well before I add in any liquid ingredients. And the whisk does a good job, though you can use a spatula as well, but I like using a hand whisk. Now remember, this does not have to go in a mixer, and it's probably better if you don't use this recipe in a mixer because you don't want to overmix it. Now we're going to add the wet ingredients, and I like to put the wet ingredients all together. So here we have our milk or milk substitute, the eggs, and we're going to add in our flavorings, the vanilla, and I also add in the almond extract and my famous ingredient, that is olive oil instead of any other kind of margarine or butter or other kind of oil. We're adding the olive oil, and that's going to really give it a good texture. So I'm going to take all of those wet ingredients, give it a little stir, and now I'm going to pour it in to the dry ingredients. And I pretty much pour it all in at one time, and we're going to mix it up. And again, if you do it in the mixer, you might tend to overmix it. It'll overdevelop the gluten, which means your cake will be kind of rubbery. So I like to do it by hand so you don't end up walking away from a mixer that's just mixing, mixing, mixing. So I'm using a spatula and I'm just scraping the bottom and giving it a turn. And we're going to see that this is going to make it a very thick batter, almost like a brownie batter. You're going to see once it's all mixed in. Take some time for it all to get mixed in. What's happening too is the oil is going to be coating the flour so that before we add the rest of the liquid, you see how nice and thick it is? Before we add the warm liquid, the oil is going to protect the flour from the gluten developing too fast and too much and making it rubbery. So here I'm making coffee that's boiling water. And I'm going to add a heaping tablespoon of a strong coffee. If you have some strong coffee already in your brewing machine, you could use that too. Mix it together. And then I'm going to add this to my batter. But watch that I'm not going to add it all at one time. I'm going to start adding a little bit at a time because you have a very thick batter. And if you add in all that liquid at one time, it's going to be very hard to mix in. But if I add little bits at a time, then it will slowly be incorporated into the batter. And we're going to be going from what was a brownie type texture of a batter to a very loose batter, very liquidy batter. But it takes a little bit of time. Now I'm going to add a little bit more, and you see, just notice how it's slowly getting thinner. This is really the last ingredient that we're going to add. And I was telling you about the oil. Oil is more liquid than a hard oil like butter or margarine, so that it really coats the flour so you get a nice soft cake. A nice soft crumb. You'll see you'll love this cake. Now I just poured in the rest because it was already getting nice and liquidy. Now what sometimes happens when you're mixing in one bowl is that you think you've mixed it all and you think that it's all nicely incorporated, but then you pour it into your baking pans and you notice that there's some thick batter left on the bottom. So you don't even know where to add that because it's uneven. It's an uneven mixture. So what I do is I do what's called the two-bowl method. Now you don't have to do this if you're good at mixing. I sometimes leave things at the bottom, so I like to use a two-bowl method. And what I do is I grab another bowl and I pour my batter into that bowl so that everything that was on the bottom of the bowl, I scrape up and it's now on the top of the next bowl. And then after I put it into the next bowl, I give it a little bit of stir, and then I put it back into the first bowl. And after that, you know that everything is very well incorporated, and the batter is evenly mixed. Pouring it back into the first one, and now we're ready to put our cake batter into the cake pans to bake them. And make sure to get up all that nice, yummy batter. And if you don't, you could just lick it up yourself and eat it before it's baked because it sure is good. Okay. think we did a good job on that. Now, just give it another little mix, and now we're going to fill up the pans. Now, when you fill up the pans, I like to fill it up between a half and 2/3 full. Now, I have two different pans. The small one that you see on the left is a 2-inch tall pan, and the one on the right is a 3-inch tall pan. So one is going to the 3-inch tall pan is going to take a little longer to bake. And also it's a bigger pan diameter-wise as well. So I'm trying to just empty the batter. And then sometimes from the mixing you get bubbles, and we don't want to have any big bubbles inside the cake, little tunnels. So what we do is we take the pan and we wrap it hard on the counter, like I'm doing now, and you'll actually see, it's hard to see in the camera, but you'll actually see the bubbles kind of surface at the top. And then I give it a spin so that the batter kind of goes up the sides, so that when the cake rises, usually rises, starts in the center, but it makes it a little bit more of an even rise. And here's the cake that just came out of the oven. It has a little bit of a rise in the center, but now it's ready to cool down, and we cool it on the racks. And we'll take the rest. In the workshop, you'll find out how we release the cake and how we make it into sections and decorate it.